Park stood at the entrance of the Grand Assembly and took a deep breath. The massive doors before him were made of a metal that did not exist on Earth. They were carved with symbols from 100 different species, each one representing thousands of years of history. Humanity's symbol was there too, near the bottom corner, small and almost hidden. They had only earned their place 60 years ago. He adjusted his uniform and checked his documents one final time. Everything was in order. The petition was simple and fair. Earth wanted rights to 3-star systems near their territory. The systems were empty. No one lived there. No one wanted them. It should have been an easy request. His voice came through his earpiece. She was watching from their embassy ship, stationed safely outside the great station called the Spire. The quantum link is stable. Earth Command is watching. The whole planet is watching. No pressure then, said with a small smile. You will do fine, you always do. The doors opened, walked into the chamber. The Grand Assembly was enormous. Thousands of seats rose up in circles around a central platform. Representatives from over 200 species filled those seats. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had no bodies at all, just floating clouds of light that somehow thought and spoke. Had studied them all. He knew their names, their histories, their customs. He had spent his whole adult life preparing for moments like this. At the highest seats sat They were tall reptilian creatures with 6 limbs and eyes like cold yellow stones. They had ruled this part of the galaxy for 10,000 years. Their high speaker, a massive creature named, watched approach with obvious disgust. Beside sat the collective. They were insect-like beings who shared one mind across millions of bodies. They controlled most of the trade in the galaxy. They did not like or dislike humans. They simply did not think about them at all. Reached the central platform. A light shone down on him from above. Every eye in the chamber turned to look at the small, soft creature standing alone in that great space. I am Park, he said clearly, Envoy of Earth. I come before this assembly with a petition, as is my right under galactic law. Made a sound that might have been a laugh. The human wishes to speak. How amusing. Very well, little creature, speak quickly. We have important matters to discuss after you are finished. Did not let the insult show on his face. He had been trained for this. Humans had learned in their 60 years among the stars that most species did not respect them. They were too young, too small, too new. Earth had decided long ago that the best response was patience. Show them respect. Follow their laws. Prove through actions that humanity deserved its place among the stars. I petition for territorial rights to the systems designated HR 7721, HR 7722, and HR 7723, said. These systems are unclaimed. They contain no inhabited worlds. Earth wishes to establish research stations and mining operations there. We have prepared all necessary documents and environmental studies. He transmitted the files to every representative in the chamber. Hours of work, months of preparation, everything done perfectly according to their rules. Did not even look at the documents. He waved one of his 6 hands dismissively. Blinked, high speaker with respect, the petition follows all proper procedures. Perhaps if the assembly could review the materials. I said, his voice was cold. Humanity expands too quickly. You breed like insects. You spread across space like a disease. The assembly will not grant you more room to infect our galaxy. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some representatives looked uncomfortable. Others nodded in agreement. Most simply watched with empty eyes, unwilling to speak against kept his voice calm. High speaker, galactic law states that any species may petition for unclaimed territory. The law requires a proper review and vote. I am asking only for what the law provides. You dare lecture me about law, rose from his seat. He was 3 times height. His yellow eyes burned with anger. You dare stand in this chamber and tell me what I must do. I am simply stating the procedure that this assembly agreed upon. Silence. The word echoed through the chamber. Every representative went still, felt his heart beating faster, but he did not step back. He did not lower his eyes. He was the voice of Earth, and Earth did not bow. "This human threatens the sovereignty of the Council," announced. "He comes into our sacred chamber and makes demands. He speaks to the High Speaker as if he were an equal. This cannot be allowed." His blood went cold. "I have made no threats. I have followed every protocol. I have shown nothing but respect." "Guards!" 4 soldiers appeared from the shadows. They were huge, covered in armor, carrying weapons that glowed with deadly energy. They surrounded in seconds. His voice screamed in his earpiece. "Get out of there! This isn't right, this isn't legal, they can't do this." Could not run. There was nowhere to go. He stood straight and looked up at. "Whatever you do to me, the galaxy will see. Earth will see. You are making a terrible mistake." Smiled. It was an ugly thing, full of teeth. "The only mistake was allowing your species into this assembly. A mistake I will now begin to correct." He gave the order. The guards activated their weapons, felt a pain beyond anything he had ever imagined. Neural disintegration. It destroyed the mind piece by piece while keeping the body alive. It was considered the most cruel form of execution in the galaxy. It was illegal under 17 different treaties, and it was happening to him in front of thousands of witnesses because he had dared to ask for what the law allowed. In his final moments, as his thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm, managed to speak. His voice carried across the silent chamber, broadcast across the galaxy through the quantum link that still connected him to his ship, to Earth, to 8 billion humans who watched in horror. "Earth will remember." Then he was gone. Screamed. She screamed until her voice broke. The other crew members on the embassy ship held her back as she tried to run to the transport bay, tried to go to him, tried to do something even though there was nothing anyone could do. The chamber was silent, even seemed surprised by how easy it had been. He looked at the body of the human envoy lying on the floor of the Grand Assembly and felt nothing but satisfaction. One less vermin in the galaxy. Perhaps the others would learn from this. Perhaps they would finally understand their place. He did not notice the elderly representative watching from the shadows. Ren had seen many things in his long life, but nothing quite like this. He had warned them. He had told them that the humans were different, that they should not be treated like the other young species. No one had listened. Now, as he watched the human woman weeping on the video feed from their ship, he felt something he had not felt in centuries. Fear, not of the humans, but of what they might become. 12 light-years away, on a planet called Earth, 8 billion people watched their envoy die. They watched him speak for peace and be murdered for it. They watched the most powerful beings in the galaxy laugh at his body. And deep beneath the frozen ground of Siberia, in a facility that existed on no map, a red light began to blink. Computer systems that had slept for decades suddenly woke. Power flowed through cables that had never been used. Doors that had never been opened began to unlock. A synthetic voice spoke in the empty darkness. Annihilation protocol authorized. Awakening sequence initiated. Earth remembered. Admiral had served Earth for 38 years. He had commanded ships. He had fought pirates. He had negotiated with alien species who looked at humans the way humans looked at ants. Through all of it, he had believed in peace. He had believed that patience and wisdom would earn humanity its place among the stars. Now he sat in the command center of the United Earth Defense Council, watching the execution footage for the 12th time, and he felt that belief crumble into dust. The room was full of the most powerful people on Earth: presidents, generals, scientists, leaders from every nation. They watched the screen in silence. Some had tears on their faces. Others had fists clenched so tight their knuckles had turned white. When the footage ended, no one spoke for a long moment. What was there to say? Admiral stood. He was 58 years old. His hair had gone gray long ago. His face was lined with the weight of decisions that had cost lives, but his voice was steady when he finally spoke. For 60 years we played by their rules. We followed their laws. We smiled when they insulted us. We bowed when they demanded it. We sent our best in to speak for us, to represent everything good about humanity. He paused. And they murdered him in front of the entire galaxy, like he was nothing. The room remained silent. Park was not just an envoy. He was a symbol of our hope that we could find our place in the galaxy through peace. They did not just kill him, they killed that hope. Turned to face the assembly. I am asking for authorization of the Annihilation Protocol. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. A woman stood. She was the president of the European Federation, one of the most powerful leaders on Earth. Admiral, with respect, many of us were not even told about this protocol. What exactly are we authorizing? Nodded, he had expected this question. 60 years ago, when we first made contact with alien life, our leaders made a decision. We would pursue peace. We would integrate with the galactic community. We would be good neighbors. He paused. But they were not fools. They knew that peace only works when both sides want it. So while we smiled and bowed and followed their rules, we also prepared, in secret, for the day when peace might fail. He pressed a button. Images appeared on every screen in the room. Ships, weapons, facilities hidden in asteroids and moons across the solar system, things that officially did not exist. We call it the Ghost Fleet, 400 stealth carriers, 12,000 automated warships, weapons that the galaxy has never seen. Let them absorb this information. We also built 12 planet crackers. We call them the Hammers of God. Each one can destroy a moon or make a planet uninhabitable. The room erupted in shocked whispers. You built weapons of mass destruction, someone shouted, without telling anyone. We built the ability to defend ourselves, replied calmly. Every generation of leaders since first contact has known about this. They kept the secret. They prayed we would never need to use it. Well, now we need it. The debates lasted for hours. Some argued for diplomacy, send angry messages, demand justice through proper channels. Others pointed out that the proper channels had just murdered their envoy on live broadcast. A few suggested surrendering, accepting humanity's place at the bottom of the galactic hierarchy. They were shouted down. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Every nation, every leader, every voice spoke as one. Annihilation Protocol was authorized. Deep beneath Siberia, in the facility known only as the Vault, Dr. Shin Myra watched the authorization codes come through. She was 45 years old. She had spent her entire adult life building weapons she hoped would never be used. Now she felt sick to her stomach. The doors of the vault opened for the first time since they were sealed. Row after row of ships stretched into the darkness. They were beautiful in a terrible way, sleek and black and deadly. They had no windows. They needed no crews. They were built for one purpose only. General Ho arrived within the hour. He commanded the Ghost Fleet, a force that most of Earth's own military did not know existed. He was a hard man with cold eyes and a voice like gravel. He looked at the awakening fleet and nodded. "How long until they are ready?" he asked. 48 hours, Dr. Shin replied. The ships need time to power up. The weapons need to be calibrated. The AI systems need to synchronize. Make it 36, turn to leave. The galaxy thinks we are weak. Let us show them how wrong they are. While the fleet prepared, a smaller ship approached Earth. It carried the body of Park and the surviving members of the embassy mission. Stood at the front of the ship, staring out at the blue planet growing larger in the viewport. She had not slept since the execution. She had not eaten. She had simply stood there holding identification tags in her hand, replaying his last words in her mind. Earth will remember. He had known. In those final moments, he had known exactly what his death would mean. When the ship landed, Admiral was waiting personally. He watched the crew carry out the coffin draped in Earth's flag. He watched walk down the ramp, looking like a ghost herself. "I want to go with the fleet," she said. No greeting, no formality, just those words. Studied her face. He saw the grief there, the rage, the determination. "The fleet is going to war. It will be dangerous." "I do not care about danger, I care about justice." She held up tags. "He was going to ask me to marry him after the mission. He showed me the ring before we left. He said he wanted to do it properly when we got home." Her voice cracked but did not break. "They took that from us. They took everything from us. I need to be there when we take it back." Was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Report to the flagship Retribution. I will inform General." 36 hours later, the Ghost Fleet rose. They launched from hidden bases across the solar system, from hollowed-out asteroids, from the dark side of moons, from facilities buried so deep that even satellites could not detect them. 400 carriers, 12,000 warships, enough firepower to burn worlds. The galaxy had not seen them coming. The galaxy had not believed humans were capable of such things. The young species, the weak species, the vermin who bred too fast and talked too much. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. Stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the stars streak past as the fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel. Around her, officers worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. No one spoke unless necessary. There was nothing to say. Everyone knew what they were going to do. Everyone had made peace with it. She held tags against her heart. "I am bringing you with me," she whispered. "You wanted them to remember. I will make sure they never forget." On Earth, the people watched the fleet depart. They stood in streets and parks and rooftops, looking up at the sky even though there was nothing to see. The ships were already too far away, moving faster than light toward a destiny that would change the galaxy forever. President addressed the planet that night. She was a small woman with kind eyes, but her voice carried the weight of 8 billion souls. "We did not choose this war," she said. "We chose peace. For 60 years we chose peace. We followed their laws. We respected their traditions. We sent our children to their schools and our diplomats to their councils. We believed that if we were patient enough, if we were good enough, they would accept us." She paused. The silence stretched across the world. "We were wrong. They murdered our envoy. They laughed at his body. They made it clear that they will never see us as equals, that they will never give us the respect we have earned, that they will always see us as vermin to be controlled or destroyed." Her eyes hardened. "So now we will teach them a different lesson. We are not vermin, we are not weak. We are humanity, and when you push us far enough, we push back. Not with words, not with protests, with fire, with steel, with the full fury of a species that survived ice ages and plagues and wars and still reached for the stars." She took a breath. "To the galaxy watching this broadcast, I say this: we gave you 60 years of peace. You answered with blood. Now you will see what humanity is truly capable of. And you will remember. For the rest of time, you will remember." The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, alien species watched with confusion and amusement. The humans were making threats. The little soft creatures with no claws and no scales and no natural weapons. What could they possibly do? They would find out soon enough. 2 weeks passed after the execution of the human envoy. The galaxy returned to its normal business. Ships traveled between stars. Trade flowed through ancient routes. They celebrated their victory over the upstart species who had dared to challenge them. High Speaker gave speeches about the natural order of things. Some species were meant to rule. Others were meant to serve. Humans belonged in the second category. The sooner they accepted this, the better for everyone. On the Of Prime, life continued without change. The cities glittered under 3 suns. Millions went about their daily lives, secure in the knowledge that their empire was the greatest in the galaxy. They had ruled for 10,000 years. They would rule for 10,000 more. Then the disappearances began. It started with a patrol ship near the border of human space. The ship sent its regular check-in signal and then nothing. No distress call, no emergency beacon, just silence. The military assumed it was an equipment failure. They sent another ship to investigate. That ship disappeared too. Over the next 3 days, 17 vessels vanished without a trace. No debris, no bodies, no evidence that they had ever existed. It was as if they had simply flown into the void and ceased to be. Commander sat in his war room, surrounded by military advisors who had no explanations to offer. He was the highest-ranking officer in the fleet, a veteran of 100 campaigns. He had crushed rebellions. He had destroyed enemy fleets. He had never faced anything like this. It must be the humans, one advisor suggested. They are retaliating for their envoy. Laughed, the sound echoed off the stone walls. The humans, those primitive creatures with their slow ships and their weak weapons, they could not destroy one of our patrol ships, let alone 17. They do not have the capability. Then what is causing the disappearances? Equipment failures, navigation errors, perhaps a natural phenomenon we have not yet discovered. Waved his hand dismissively. Send more ships, find out what is happening, and stop wasting my time with fantasies about human revenge. But the disappearances continued, and then the reports started coming in. Strange readings on long-range sensors, ghost images that appeared and vanished before they could be tracked, ships that seemed to materialize out of empty space and then fade back into nothing. Ren of the Collective had lived for 300 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched young species grow into great civilizations and old species fade into extinction. He knew how to read the signs of change. And right now, every sign pointed to disaster. He sat in his private chamber studying the intelligence reports his agents had gathered. What he saw made his blood run cold. Human ships had been detected moving through the galaxy. Not dozens, thousands. They traveled in perfect formation through routes that should have been impossible to navigate. They used propulsion systems that they had never seen before. They moved in complete silence, appearing on sensors for just a moment before vanishing again. How was this possible? The humans had only been spacefaring for 3 centuries. They had been traveling between stars for 50,000 years. How could such a young species possess technology that even they could not understand? Ren tried to contact Earth. All channels were blocked. Every message he sent was met with the same automated response. Earth is not accepting communications at this time. He tried contacting other human colonies. Same response. He tried using back channels, secret frequencies, methods that had never failed before. Nothing worked. The humans had sealed themselves off from the galaxy. They were not talking anymore. They were preparing. Panic began to spread through the Galactic Assembly. Species that had cheered when the human envoy died now suddenly remembered urgent business elsewhere. Ambassadors found reasons to return home. Trade agreements were quietly suspended. Everyone could feel something coming, even if they did not know what. They remained confident. Commander increased patrols along the border. He ordered his fleet to battle readiness. He gave speeches about the superiority of warriors and the weakness of all other species. He believed every word. Ren made one final attempt to reach someone who might listen. He found a private channel that still worked, a frequency that had given him years ago during a diplomatic function. He did not expect her to answer, but he had to try. To his surprise, she did. Her face appeared on his screen. She looked different, harder. The gentle diplomat he remembered was gone. In her place was someone with cold eyes and a jaw set like stone. "Ren," she said, her voice was flat, "I am surprised you still have this frequency." "Miss," Ren chose his words carefully, "I wanted you to know that I am sorry. What happened to your envoy was wrong. I tried to speak against it. The collective wanted no part of that execution." And yet you did nothing to stop it. The words hit like physical blows. Ren lowered his head. No, we did nothing. We were afraid of we thought it was better to stay silent than to risk their anger. And now I am afraid of something else. Ren met her eyes. Please, miss, tell me what is coming. Help me prepare my people. We were not your enemies. Was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was ice. You watched them kill him. You sat in that chamber and watched them murder an innocent man who came to them with nothing but words and hope. You did nothing. You said nothing. And now you ask us for mercy. I ask only for understanding, for information. Whatever is coming, surely it can be stopped. Surely there is still room for diplomacy. Diplomacy died with Park, leaned forward. You want to know what is coming? Look to the skis above Prime. You will see it soon enough. The connection ended. Ren sat in the darkness of his chamber, feeling older than he had ever felt. He had tried. It was not enough. Nothing would be enough now. On Prime, Commander received a new report. His sensors had detected something at the edge of the system, something massive, something that had not been there a moment ago. He ordered his telescope arrays to focus on the location. What he saw made his heart stop. Ships, human ships, thousands of them, arranged in perfect geometric formations that stretched across the void. They had appeared out of nowhere, bypassing every defense, every sensor, every warning system that had built over 10,000 years of warfare. The fleet was larger than anything had ever seen, larger than anything in the historical records, larger than anything he had believed possible. And it was pointed directly at his world. Before he could give any orders, a transmission cut through every frequency in the system. A human face appeared on every screen on Prime. Admiral, Supreme Commander of Earth's forces. His expression was calm. His voice was steady. But his eyes burned with a fury that transcended species. People of Prime, I am Admiral of the United Earth Defense Council. 2 weeks ago, your leaders murdered our envoy in cold blood. They violated every law of the Galactic Assembly. They laughed at his body and called our species vermin. The Admiral paused. Behind him, through the viewport of his ship, the Ghost Fleet was visible. Endless rows of warships, their weapons already glowing with power. This is your only warning. Surrender the individuals responsible for the death of Park. Hand them over for trial. Do this within 12 hours and no further blood will be spilled. Refuse, and we will demonstrate exactly what happens when humanity is pushed too far. The transmission ended. Commander stared at the screen. For the first time in his long career, he felt something unfamiliar. Fear. But fear quickly turned to anger. His people had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. They had crushed every enemy who had dared to challenge them. These humans with their surprise fleet were nothing. They were vermin. They would be destroyed like all the others. He began issuing orders. Every ship in the system was to converge on the human fleet. 800 warships, the pride of the Empire, the greatest armada in the galaxy, appeared on his screen demanding to know what was happening, told him to stay calm. The situation was under control. The humans would be crushed. Their pathetic fleet would be scattered across the void. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral watched the ships beginning to move. He had expected this. He had hoped they would surrender, but he had expected this. They have refused, he said quietly. General nodded. Then we proceed with the plan. Turned to look at. She stood at the observation window, watching the enemy fleet approach. Her hand was closed around identification tags. Miss said gently, you should prepare yourself. What comes next will not be pleasant. Did not turn around. Nothing about this is pleasant, Admiral, but some things are necessary. She watched the stars. Somewhere out there among those distant lights had died believing in peace. Now she would make sure his death meant something. The 12-hour deadline passed. They had not surrendered. Admiral gave the order. All ships engage. The Ghost Fleet moved forward, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Commander watched the human fleet approach and felt confident. Yes, the enemy had more ships than expected. Yes, their appearance had been a surprise, but they had fought 1,000 wars. They knew how to destroy inferior species. His fleet formed into the traditional battle wedge, a formation that had brought victory for 10,000 years. 800 warships, each one crewed by the finest warriors the Empire had ever produced. Their weapons were charged. Their shields were at full power. They were ready. The humans came in a strange formation. It looked almost like a web, with ships spread out in patterns that made no tactical sense. Smiled. These primitives did not even know how to arrange their fleet for battle. This would be easier than he thought. All ships, he commanded, open fire. 800 warships unleashed their weapons at once. Plasma beams, kinetic rounds, missiles with warheads powerful enough to crack moons. The barrage was massive, overwhelming, enough firepower to destroy a planet. The human ships did not try to dodge. They flew directly into the attack. For a moment, thought he had won. Then his sensors showed him something impossible. The weapons were not hitting. Every plasma beam bent away at the last moment. Every missile exploded before reaching its target. Every kinetic round simply vanished into distortions in space that had not been there a second ago. The humans had shields unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Shields that did not just block attacks but erase them from existence. Before could process this, the human fleet fired back. He had expected conventional weapons, lasers, missiles, maybe some primitive nuclear devices. What he got was something else entirely. Black beams shot from the human ships. They did not travel through space. They simply appeared, connecting the human vessels to the fleet in an instant. Wherever those beams touched, reality itself seemed to collapse. Ships did not explode. They compressed. In heartbeats, mighty warships were crushed down to points smaller than atoms, their crews screaming for just a moment before they were silenced forever. Directed singularity cannons. The humans had weaponized black holes. Watched in horror as his fleet began to die. Ships that had served the Empire for centuries were gone in seconds. Warriors who had trained their entire lives never even had a chance to fight back. The battle formation broke apart as captains tried to flee, tried to find some escape from the horror that was consuming them. But there was no escape. A second wave of human weapons activated. These were different. Instead of destroying ships, they infected them. Signals broadcast on frequencies they had not known existed. Within moments, the AI systems that controlled targeting and navigation on ships went insane. Ships began firing on each other. Engines burned at full power in random directions. Crews found themselves locked out of their own systems, helpless passengers in vessels that had become their tombs. Viral AI. The humans had built programs that could take over any computer system in seconds. The Battle of Prime lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, the fleet was gone. 800 warships reduced to scattered debris and compressed points of mass. Hundreds of thousands of warriors dead. The greatest military force in the galaxy, destroyed in less time than it took to eat a meal. Commander's flagship was not destroyed. It was captured. Human soldiers in powered armor that made them look like metal giants breached the hull and fought their way to the bridge. They moved with terrifying efficiency, their weapons cutting through warriors like they were made of paper. Tried to fight. He drew his ceremonial blade, the weapon his family had carried for 30 generations. A human soldier knocked it aside with one armored hand and pressed him against the wall. "Commander," the soldier said through external speakers, "you are under arrest for conspiracy in the murder of Earth Envoy Park. You will be taken to stand trial. Resist, and you will be killed. Choose." Chose to live. He told himself it was strategy. Stay alive. find an opportunity to escape, lead his people to victory later. But deep down in the part of his mind he would never admit existed, he knew the truth. He was afraid. These humans were not the weak creatures he had been told about. They were something else entirely. While was being secured, another team was hunting bigger prey. The High Speaker who had ordered execution had fled the capital the moment the battle turned against his fleet. He took a personal shuttle and ran for the edge of the system, hopping to reach the jump point before the humans could catch him. He almost made it. The shuttle carrying him was fast, one of the finest personal vessels in the Empire. But Strike Team was faster. Their ship appeared out of nowhere, matching his speed perfectly, firing targeted shots that disabled his engines without destroying the vessel. Was the first one through the airlock. She found hiding in the cargo bay, curled up in a corner like the prey he had always claimed humans were. When he saw her, his yellow eyes went wide with terror. "Please," he said. His voice was nothing like the confident boom that had sentenced to death. "Please, I was just following tradition. Humans are supposed to be beneath us. Everyone knows this. I did not know you would. I did not expect." Walked toward him slowly. In her hand, she held identification tags. She stopped when she was close enough to see her reflection in his eyes. "He came to you with words," she said quietly. "He came with documents and petitions and hope. He believed in the system your people created. He followed every rule. He showed you nothing but respect." I know, and I am sorry. You killed him anyway, in front of the whole galaxy, and then you laughed." Opened his mouth to speak again, held up her hand, and he fell silent. "You are going to stand trial," she told him. "You are going to answer for what you did, and then your own people are going to decide your fate." She leaned closer. "But I want you to know something first. I want you to understand exactly what your arrogance has cost." She activated a display on her wrist. Images appeared in the air between them. Images of the destroyed fleet. Images of the human ships now orbiting Prime. And images of something else, something that made hearts stop. 12 massive structures, each one larger than a moon. They hung in space like metal gods, their surfaces covered in weapons that glowed with contained fury. "We call them the hammers of God," said. "Each one can fire a projectile at 90% of light speed. The impact can crack a planet, and we have 12 of them." She paused. "We built them while you were laughing at us, while you were calling us vermin, while you were so certain of your superiority that you never once thought to wonder what we might be capable of." Stared at the images. His mind could not process what he was seeing. You would destroy our world. If you had surrendered, no, but one of your factions tried something while we were taking your fleet. Eyes hardened. They activated a planet-killer weapon. They tried to destroy our entire fleet with one shot. We stopped them, but we cannot let such an attack go unanswered. She transmitted an order. In orbit above Prime, one of the hammers of God came to life. The projectile launched. It was not aimed at the planet itself. Instead, it targeted Prime's largest moon, a rocky body that had watched over the since before their species evolved. The impact was visible across the entire system. The moon did not explode. It cracked like an egg struck with a hammer. Massive pieces of rock began breaking away, entering new orbits, falling toward the planet below. The people watched in horror as their sky filled with debris. The destruction would take months to fully unfold. Cities would be buried. Oceans would be poisoned. Millions would die. It was not the end of their world, but it was a wound that would never fully heal. Collapsed to the floor of his shuttle. He was weeping now, making sounds that no should ever make. His empire was falling around him, and all he could think about was how wrong he had been, about everything. The government surrendered within hours, not because their leaders wanted to, but because their people demanded it. The citizens who had cheered for his execution now filled the streets calling for peace. They had seen what humanity was capable of. They wanted no more of it. was handed over to a human tribunal. He was joined by a dozen other officials who had played a role in the execution. They stood in a makeshift courtroom on a human carrier, facing judges who looked at them with cold disgust. The trial was brief. The evidence was overwhelming. There was no defense that could justify what had been done. On the final day, before sentencing, was given the opportunity to speak. She stood before and the other prisoners, holding tags in her hand. "He came to you with words," she said. "He came with hope and respect and a belief that the galaxy could be fair. He was the best of us, and you destroyed him because you could, because you thought we were weak, because you thought there would be no consequences." She held up the tags so everyone could see. "You were wrong. There are always consequences, and now you will live with yours for whatever time you have left." She turned and walked away. The prisoners were transferred to their own people for final judgment. It took less than a day. Was executed by his own citizens, torn apart by the families of warriors who had died in the battle he had made inevitable. The others received similar fates. Justice of a sort was done, but felt no satisfaction. Standing on the observation deck of the Retribution, watching Prime grow smaller in the distance, she felt only emptiness. Was still dead. No amount of vengeance could bring him back. No amount of destruction could fill the hole in her heart. Admiral found her there, staring at the stars. "We won," he said quietly. "The Empire is broken. The galaxy will never treat us the same way again." Nodded slowly. "We won, but at what cost?" Did not have an answer. He had asked himself the same question. He had seen the debris falling toward Prime. He had watched millions of lives end in 11 minutes of battle. He had done what was necessary. He was not sure he could live with what was necessary. "The fleet is ready to return home," he said finally. "President wants to address the galaxy. She wants to talk about peace." Almost laughed. "Peace, after all this. We did not want war. They forced our hand. But that does not mean we have to become monsters." Put a hand on her shoulder. "Believed in peace. Honor his memory by helping us build it." Was silent for a long moment, then she nodded. For she said softly, "I will try." The fleet turned toward home. Behind them, Prime burned under a sky full of falling stones. The galaxy watched and remembered. 5 years passed. The galaxy changed more in those 5 years than it had in the previous 5,000. Old powers fell. New alliances formed. And at the center of it all stood humanity, no longer the young species begging for scraps at the edge of civilization. The Empire was gone. It had shattered into dozens of independent worlds, each one struggling to rebuild from the devastation of the war. Many of them had asked for human protection. They had been enemies once. Now they were something closer to children, looking to their former victims for guidance and safety. The Grand Assembly had been reformed. The old council chamber where had been murdered was demolished. In its place stood a new structure, built by human architects with engineers. The design was different. There was no high seat for any species. All representatives sat at the same level, facing each other as equals. Humanity held a permanent seat on the new council. They had veto power over any decision. No one had argued against this. No one had dared. President served 2 terms before stepping down. Her successor continued her policies of careful diplomacy mixed with quiet strength. The Ghost Fleet was never disbanded. The hammers of God remained ready. Humanity would never be caught unprepared again. Ambassador O walked through the halls of the new assembly building, her footsteps echoing on floors made of metal and stone from 100 different worlds. She had been once a communications officer who had watched her lover die on a distant station. Now she had a new name to match her new role. She was the voice of Earth in the galaxy, just as had been. Some days she wondered if he would be proud of what she had become. Other days, she wondered if he would even recognize her. Ren was waiting for her in the conference room. The old had aged visibly since the war. His species usually lived for 500 years, but Ren looked like he might not make it to 400. The guilt weighed on him. The knowledge that he could have spoken up, could have done something, and chose to stay silent instead. "Ambassador O," he said, rising to greet her, "thank you for coming." Sat across from him. Between them lay a stack of documents, proposals for new laws that would prevent anything like execution from ever happening again. They had been working on these laws for 3 years. They were almost finished. "The Protection of Diplomatic Personnel Act," said, picking up the top document. "Final draft. Are we ready for a vote?" "I believe so. I have spoken with most of the other representatives. They will support it." Ren paused. "There is some resistance from the newer members. They fear that Earth is using these laws to increase its power over the galaxy." "Are they wrong?" The question hung in the air. Ren looked at her with old, tired eyes. "Perhaps not entirely, but does it matter? The laws are fair. They protect everyone, not just humans, and they are necessary." He shook his head slowly. "We should have had such laws long ago. We should have listened when your envoy asked us to follow the rules we ourselves had created." Said nothing. There was nothing to say. The past could not be changed. Only the future was open to them now. The vote was held the next day. The Protection of Diplomatic Personnel Act passed unanimously. From that moment forward, any attack on an envoy or ambassador would be treated as an act of war against the entire assembly. Every species would be obligated to respond. No one would ever again be able to murder a diplomat and expect no consequences. It was a good law, a necessary law, felt no satisfaction in its passage. She only felt tired. On Earth, Admiral had retired to a small house by the ocean. He spent his days writing his memoirs and watching the waves crash against the shore. He had been offered statues, monuments, his name on buildings and ships. He had refused them all. What he had done was necessary. He believed that still, but he did not want to be celebrated for it. He did not want children to grow up thinking that war was glorious. He wanted them to understand that war was horror, and that it should only ever be the last resort of a desperate people. His memoirs would be honest. They would describe the fear he felt when he gave the order to attack. They would describe the sickness in his stomach when he watched the fleet die. They would describe the nightmares that still visited him, 5 years later, showing him the faces of the hundreds of thousands who had died because of his commands. Let history judge him. He would not judge himself. Came to visit him once a year, on the anniversary of his death. They would sit together on his porch, watching the sunset, talking about the past and the future and everything in between. "The galaxy is different now," she said during one of these visits. "They respect us. Some of them fear us. A few of them are even starting to like us." Nodded slowly. "And is that what would have wanted?" Was quiet for a long moment. He wanted us to be equals, to have a seat at the table, to be treated with the same respect as any other species. She looked out at the ocean. "We have that now. We paid a terrible price for it, but we have it. Do you think there could have been another way?" "I have asked myself that question every day for 5 years," shook her head. "I do not know, maybe if had been different, maybe if they had spoken up, maybe if 1,000 small things had gone differently, but they did not, and we cannot change what was, we can only decide what will be." Smiled sadly. "You sound like a politician." "I am a politician now. That is what he made me. That is what they made me." She held up her hand. On her finger was a ring, simple and silver. Ring, the one he had never gotten to give her. "But I am still the person who loved him. I carry that with me too." They sat in silence as the sun sank below the horizon. Across the galaxy, the changes continued. Species that had been oppressed by the found new freedom. Trade routes that had been controlled by ancient monopolies open to everyone. Young species that had been told they would never amount to anything looked at humanity and saw hope. If the soft creatures with no claws could rise so high, perhaps anyone could. Not everyone was happy about the new order. Some species grumbled that humans had become what they had replaced. Others plotted in secret, dreaming of the day when they could bring the arrogant newcomers down. But none of them acted. None of them dared. The memory of the Battle of Prime was too fresh. The image of a cracked moon too vivid. On a refugee station at the edge of what had been space, a young girl looked up at her mother with wide yellow eyes. "Mother," she said, "the teacher told us about the war today. She told us about the humans." The mother felt her hearts clench. She had been a child herself when the war happened. She remembered the sky filling with falling stones. She remembered the screams. "What did she tell you?" "She said the humans destroyed our fleet. She said they broke our moon. She said they killed many of our people." The girl's voice trembled. "Are they monsters, Mother? Should we be afraid of them?" The mother was silent for a long moment. She thought about everything she had seen, the destruction, the terror, but also what came after, the human ships that had brought food when their crops failed, the human doctors who had come to treat the sick, the human teachers who had opened schools for refugee children. "No," she said finally, "they are not monsters." "Then what are they?" The mother looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth spun around its yellow sun, home to a species that had shown the galaxy two faces, the face of peace and patience, and the face of terrible, unstoppable fury. "They are like us," she said. "They want to live, they want to be safe, they want to be treated fairly. For many years they tried to get these things through kindness. They followed our rules, they respected our traditions. They asked only for what they had earned." She paused, remembering the broadcasts from those terrible days, remembering the human president speaking to the galaxy with tears in her eyes and steel in her voice. "But we did not listen. We thought they were weak because they chose peace. We thought we could do whatever we wanted to them without consequence." She shook her head. "We were wrong. They were not weak. They had simply chosen not to show their strength, and when we pushed them too far, they pushed back." The girl thought about this. So they are not prey, but they are not predators either. "No, they are something else, something new." The mother pulled her daughter close. "They are what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness, when you think that because someone wants peace they cannot make war. They taught us a lesson, a hard lesson, but perhaps a necessary one." "What lesson?" The mother looked at the stars one more time. "Never assume you know what someone is capable of. Never think that because they are different they are less, and never, ever mistake their patience for helplessness." She kissed her daughter's forehead. "The humans tried to tell us who they were. They tried for 60 years. We should have listened." On Earth, in a garden outside the new United Nations building, a memorial stood. It was made of white stone from every continent, carved with the names of those who had given their lives in service to humanity's dream of peaceful coexistence. At the center was a statue of a man in diplomat's robes, his hand raised as if in greeting. The plaque beneath it read simply, "Park Joon. He spoke for Earth, Earth ANSWERED." Visited the memorial on the 10th anniversary of his death. She stood before the statue as the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. She was older now. There was gray in her hair, lines on her face that had not been there before, but her eyes still held the same fire. "We did it," she said softly. "We changed things, not the way you wanted, not the way either of us hoped, but we changed them." The statue did not answer. Statues never do. "I still miss you, every day. I still wonder what our life would have been like if things had been different, if you had come home, if they had listened." She touched the stone face, cold under her fingers. "But I stopped asking why. There is no answer that would help. There is only what we do with the time we have left." She stepped back and looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, human ships patrolled the borders of their space. Somewhere up there, the Reformed Assembly debated laws that would shape the galaxy for centuries. Somewhere up there, young species were reaching for the stars, inspired by the story of humanity's rise. "The galaxy will remember," she whispered. "Just like you wanted. They will remember what happens when you underestimate us. They will remember the cost of arrogance. And maybe, just maybe, they will remember the lesson long enough to build something better." She placed her hand over her heart, where his ring hung on a chain against her skin. "I will never forget you. None of us will." She turned and walked away toward the building where 1,000 tasks waited. The work of building peace was never done, but it was work worth doing. It was work that honored his memory. Behind her, the statue stood in the morning light, watching over the garden, watching over the world, watching over a species that had learned to speak softly and carry an unimaginably big stick. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity would make sure they never forgot.